Today's video is a bit of a free-form kind of ramble based on a couple of Shad's most recent videos. These two videos are basically addressing how YouTube is essentially damaging Shadiversity channel and basically forcing them to make subpar quality content in order to see results, whereas what they see as high quality content doesn't seem to be working. One of the videos, it's the one YouTube makes us do it or something like that, is more focused on the channel itself and on how they're addressing it, and the other one is the documentary, Shad calls it, on SlopTube. And that's more general and addresses what he sees more as a trend in YouTube in general. I thought I'd talk about this because this is a topic that pops up regularly, I would say, and it's usually started by Shad himself. So about every year or so, you have a video about how his channel is dying or struggling. And I don't want to make light of this, by the way, just to be clear. I think Shad has all the right to, it's his livelihood, whether you agree with his opinions or his thoughts, on swords especially, or not, whether you like his content. It's fair that someone may want to try and understand why their job essentially isn't performing as it used to. With that being said, I do think that while there may be some legitimate criticism to be made towards YouTube, there's a lot of stuff that maybe Shad could be doing better and more for his channel to ensure that things go a little bit more smoothly. But this doesn't want to be the main point of the topic. I just want to kind of add my 2 cents to this conversation that periodically pops up in the SwordTube community about sword content and whether it's, still makes sense to make and watch, and how YouTube is kind of pushing or hindering that kind of content. The point Shad makes in his videos is that YouTube is essentially shifting from a platform that used to foster niche, creative, and high-quality content from smaller creators to a platform that is to something that is instead pushing small creators out and favoring big content creators, which oftentimes produce slop. He has a whole bunch of reasons that he explains for why he sees this trend, which if you want to investigate, you can watch his videos. I don't have the expertise or the interest really in analyzing YouTube's business strategy, but they're not completely unfounded and they could make sense. The algorithm is definitely something that content creators that rely on YouTube as their source of income need to keep in mind when creating content. This is something Sellsword Arts mentioned too, multiple times when talking about how they would rather prefer to make more scholarly content, you could say, around HEMA and sword practice, but what the algorithm rewards is the more pop culture stuff, so that's what they create on their main channel. And they did create a second channel to focus instead on the more, let's say, I don't know how to define it, but let's say the more researched or more highbrow content, we could say. So it's a struggle that not only Shad is seeing. Scalagrim also complained a few times about performance of his channel, about the difficulty of maintaining, performance and interest in the topics. So it kind of, it's spread around the board, this concern with the algorithm. And what I see here is that the problem is having YouTube as your only source of income. And again, I'm not faulting anyone for having that, it's a job. But you don't want to usually keep your eggs in one basket, I think that's the saying. And that's something Matt Easton instead does really well. And in fact, he usually has no complaints on this topic. Like, he is quite unconcerned with how the algorithm changes or updates or whatever it is. And that's because Matt, while his channel, I'm sure, brings in decent revenue, it's not his only source of income. He is also or maybe mainly even, I'm not sure, but he is a antique swords dealer. He is involved in the HEMA community. He has a HEMA school, if I'm not mistaken. He has collaborations with museums. He does a whole bunch of other things that mean that he has the strength to choose whether or not his content needs to align perfectly with whatever whim the algorithm has that year or day or month and doesn't need to adapt to it. Channels like Scalgrim and Shad seem to be struggling a bit more, at least from the last I've heard from themselves. Sellsword Art also, seems to be quite bound to the algorithm, but they seem to be navigating it quite well. Shad also talks about the slop aspect. So not only is there a push by the algorithm to kind of oust small creators, let's say, which he is not, by the way, so I don't know why he feels affected by the issue of the small creators, but he does mention the quality of content in a sense. So he sees a lot of more slop being suggested or having success rather than high quality content. To me, there's a mistake here in the sense that I don't disagree that there's a lot of slop, it's full, but I think he has a bit of a too black and white perspective on what slop is. He seems to see the content he makes as high quality content in general. And then there's like a red line somewhere, which is not well defined though, and then there's slop content. But the truth is that while the algorithm kind of works as a river, let's say, and goes in one direction for sure, viewers and creators, they're all different and everyone likes different things and appreciates different things. So let's take a hypothetical spectrum of swordtube creators. Let's take a PhD guy that makes videos on antique weapons. And these are essentially academic essays in video format. And let's take on the other end of the spectrum, someone who reuses footage from other creators and just comments over them in short TikTok format. And in between you have, Matt Easton, Scalgrim, me, The Latrix, Shad, all the kind of people bigger or smaller that are part of this community. Each one of us may look at every one of the other content creators or the other content formats and think something is slop or not. And none of these is really right or wrong, unless, of course, they're spreading misinformation. In that case, I would say they're objectively wrong. But other than that, just because someone talks about pop culture instead of, making an academic essay doesn't make it slop. Just because someone prefers short form versus long form doesn't make it slop. Everyone is reaching out to a certain audience and engaging them in different ways, and that's one of the cool things. I feel like Shad in this, and that often is the case, I think, sees things instead in a way too black and white approach, and I don't think that helps him in the sense that viewing his content as high quality, what makes it high quality necessarily? He talks a lot about effort. So, for example, he makes a distinction between low effort reaction content, which is the one that he and Tyrant make when they're just sitting at their desk, and then the high effort content, which is when they go out in the garden and, cut stuff and test stuff. But I would argue that that's not the effort you put into a video is not the defining factor in terms of the quality of the content itself. Yes, going out requires you to organize things a bit better. You have to bring your gear, you have to set it up, you have to find the right day, the right light and everything. But that doesn't mean the content is high quality. It just means it's high effort. At the same time, he and Tyrant especially seem to really dislike reaction content. But reaction content, it doesn't have to be garbage. It doesn't have to be, superficial. I understand if you look at reaction content as these streamers that spend 12 hours a day just watching YouTube and giving the lowest effort commentary on stuff, yeah, okay, that is slop, and I think most of us can agree on that. But there's a lot of reacting to something isn't inherently low quality or low effort. One example I can give is World of Antiquity, for instance. This is a channel that focuses a lot on debunking pseudo-archaeology and pseudo-history channels and videos. And a lot of his videos are quite static. They're reaction to other videos, but they're academically rigorous. They provide all the sources. They provide a lot of educational and informational depth. So I would struggle to see those as low effort just because they're reaction videos. Whereas if I just, grab a sword, go in my backyard and cut a pool noodle, it may be entertaining, it may be cool, but that's certainly not necessarily high quality. And you can see this a lot. Take the reviews Matthew Jensen makes of swords. They're really in depth. He does go out, he does cut pool noodles, but he adds a lot of depth to what he's doing, a lot of rigor. So every sword he reviews is done in the same way. So there's kind of a pattern you can recognize, you can compare similar metrics, similar performance, and so on and so forth. So my point here is just to say that I think Shad is a little bit misguided in the way he approaches this stuff, because he seems to view reaction stuff as a slop where it doesn't have to be, and he seems to view the high effort stuff as high quality content, which is not necessarily the case. I hope if he ever watches this, he takes this as constructive criticism and maybe, you know, can apply some of it to see if maybe it's an easier way to fight the algorithm rather than creating what he himself considers slop. But beyond this and Shad, I think what's more pressing for me here is the kind of feeling I get sometimes when I hear complaints about these channels is there's almost a deflation of motivation, perhaps. It's almost as if they struggle to find topics to talk about. It feels as if there's a lack of enthusiasm in a sense. And I can understand that people may be doing things for, 10 years, talking about swords. Maybe you get tired of it. But what always strikes me is how it's almost a struggle to find interesting topics, and they often have to resort to repeating the usual pop culture comparisons and trying to kind of piggyback, let's say, on movie franchises and on video games to try and keep interest going. And that to me is quite shocking, because I truly feel like we are in a golden age of, second golden age if you want, of interest in study of weapons. So we've never had the amount of information available we have today, the amount of data, the techniques we use to investigate antique weapons in terms of metallurgical analysis, in terms of archaeological data and everything. They've never been so detailed and so available. And it's never been so easy to communicate with the experts. So I find it honestly quite strange and baffling that there's this struggle, because my struggle is actually the opposite. I feel like I don't have enough hours in the day to be able to even list all of the cool topics that could be talked about, and I definitely don't have time to make videos about them. So I wonder where that disconnect is between the feeling that it's a struggle to create sword or hoplology related content or history related content, and my experience of the field, which is that there's constantly new stuff coming out and there's just infinite amounts of real cool information that can be communicated. So maybe it's because these channels started off in a time when it was sufficient to just talk about pop culture and talk about swords in a lighthearted way. And so then maybe my invitation to whatever channel is struggling in this sense is, hey, look around, look at papers, look at research, because there's really a lot of really, really cool stuff that I'm sure you as viewers, and I know my viewers are maybe a little more appreciative of this kind of stuff, but maybe your viewers, and I mean, big channels who maybe struggle with finding topics or keeping viewers engaged, maybe your viewers may be interested in this kind of stuff as well. Coming to the topic of content, I actually wanted to quickly update you on a few things I'm working on because, well, I think it's the right place to do so. As you probably know if you watch this channel, my interest is more in the academic and educational side of things. I like going in depth on swords, and I especially like antiques. In that sense, I am hoping to be coming to you with more videos like the ones I've been posting recently of actual antique swords from museums, from museum depots. I'm in talks with a few different places to go visit and measure some swords, and obviously if I can I'll be filming these for you so you can enjoy as well. I'm working on my thesis, which is analyzing and measuring a bunch of medieval swords, and hopefully this turns into some interesting content as well. And I'm trying to make things a little more interactive. So far we've been having the Armory Roundtable, which has been working pretty well. That's going to pick up again. It's just been a really crazy time in terms of busy period for me. But I also started, or at least started promoting, what I'm calling the study group. And this is a Patreon activity, I suppose. What I'd like to do is discuss, on a weekly basis or bi-weekly, that has to be determined, but with a group of patrons, go through a paper or source or something and kind of discuss it together and learn from it together. This is going to be a paid tier of Patreon, but I'm planning on having the first couple of study group sessions free. So feel free to join the free tier on Patreon. And that way you'll have access to the study group. And if you like it, you're more than welcome to then upgrade to the paid version and keep participating. These sessions will eventually find their way to YouTube, but the advantage of being part of the study group in the live version is that you get to interact, you get to give your suggestions and, vote on topics and papers we may be discussing and this kind of stuff and so on and so forth. And in closing here, I would just like to say how I do see how, content on YouTube is changing and how YouTube is changing as a platform. I don't necessarily think this means we as creators have to sacrifice our, our preferences or our values in terms of what we produce and what we make and what we like, even though I do understand that when YouTube is your main source of income, it may be a problem to stay perfectly independent of the algorithm. With that being said, I'm also curious to hear your opinions, whether you're a content creator and you agree or disagree with me or Shad, but even as a user, if you feel that, you get notified when my videos or the videos you're interested come out, if you feel like you're not exposed to the right kind of content, if you also agree that there's this slopification of YouTube, and how you would go forth in dealing with it. So next sword video will be a sword video, so I'll see you in just a bit. Thank you for watching and see you soon. Bye.